Manchester United 3, Fulham 1. Manchester United are off to Wembley. Wembley. One more time, Tom. Well, it might be twice more. We'll get into all of that. Welcome to the United Pubcast and the debate tonight. Is Erik ten Hag lucky? We're going to dissect a whole bunch of action that happened in 90 minutes, followed by a little bit of madness that occurred in about 90 seconds. But, Tom, we'll get into all of that. Firstly, how are you feeling after the result this morning, mate?
It's how you want to start a Monday morning. I usually don't want to sort of start it with a 3:30 or 3:25 alarm for the 3:30 a.m. kickoff on a Monday, but ultimately when it does result in sort of excitement like that, it makes it all worthwhile. And obviously Manchester United back off to Wembley, obviously Old Trafford of the South, really, in terms of almost our second home. I don't like Wembley in the semi-finals, the FA Cup. Maybe I'm a traditionalist in that aspect, but we do have Brighton there, which will be very interesting. But it is how you want to start a Monday as a Man United fan in Sydney.
100%. When did Wembley in the semi-finals become a thing? I feel like it's happened in the last 5 years or so. Definitely not.
No. It's what started in Cardiff in Wales when they knocked down the old Wembley, which would have been the last final. There was Chelsea and someone, I forget when it was. It would have been early 2000s, 2001, 2002, maybe. Someone in the chat would probably know. And then the semi-finals were at the Millennium.
Adam, I think he was born in 2002.
Actually, no, the semi-finals, when the final went to Cardiff, the semi-finals did say at Old Trafford and Villa Park. I'm not sure when the semi-finals at Wembley. I think maybe when Wembley opened, which United had the first FA Cup final there against Chelsea. Unfortunately, Drogba scored that extra time winner. I think that from then the semi-finals were at Wembley, which I'm not a fan of, but obviously they have to pay the stadium off. So it is what it is.
It is what it is indeed. But before Manchester United get to Wembley, we're going to come back to Sydney because there's a lot to dissect about this football match. Tom, let me start with the 11. What did you make of Erik ten Hag's lineup? Was there any surprises in there?
No, I thought it was maybe on the right-hand side. Like I enjoyed seeing Jadon Sancho. Well, now whether he lined up in the middle or on the right, I enjoyed seeing him being selected. Other than that, in terms of obviously, I haven't heard from Erik ten Hag, but you'd assume there's some type of injury with Rafael Varane. You don't expect him picking Harry Maguire over Varane. So let's say Varane was injured. I'm not sure what the confirmation.
Some sort of strain report saying he'll be back following the international break.
Okay, so his hands are tied there, so that's not really a surprise in regards to, okay, Harry Maguire comes in. Some people would have preferred Lindelof, of course, but ultimately, I think his hands were pretty much tied in regards to how he was going to select that team. I thought we'll get into Scott McTominay, who I thought had a poor game, but ultimately, he's the replacement for Casemiro. Erik ten Hag's not going to pick Fred to replace Casemiro, so ultimately, there's no shock in that team selection. We'll get into the performance in a little bit, but in regards to what Erik ten Hag had available, and the team in front of him in regards to Fulham, I thought it was a pretty straightforward lineup. Now, whether we agree with that or disagree, I thought Erik ten Hag, pretty confident in picking that 11.
All right, let's go into the actual performance because, God, there's a lot to break down here. I'm going to address the elephant in the room, or maybe it's quite obvious to if you were watching. Get your thoughts in. Manchester United deserve to lose that football game. I don't care what Erik ten Hag says in the press conference. My eyes don't fail me, Tom. I know Manchester United scored more goals, and Erik was very facetious in his comments post-match. But at the end of the day, that was a woeful performance. And I thought if we'll get into all the drama, but I dare say if it was 11 versus 11 till the 90th minute, I don't think Manchester United would be going to Wembley.
Yeah, if we didn't get that penalty, or if that ball doesn't go to Jadon Sancho and that play doesn't eventuate, I had the very sort of confident feeling that we were going to lose. I didn't see a way back. I just thought it was one of those days where a little bit of luck wasn't on our side, but ultimately, more importantly than that, we weren't playing well, and Fulham were playing very well. So I think we weren't at it. Fulham were definitely at it, and ultimately you put those two things together, and it's a recipe for a long afternoon. And why didn't we perform well? Was Casemiro missing? Was it because Rafael Varane was missing? Was it a accumulation of the fixtures and we're a little bit tired? Maybe it's a little bit of everything. But look, we've been playing well recently, the Liverpool result aside. So ultimately, there are going to be sort of bumps in this road, which we also all sort of agreed with a couple of weeks ago. Ultimately, when these bumps do come, it's how you deal with them. Now, why they've come, I put it down to tiredness in terms of especially the way we visibly saw the game and the look on the players. I thought, you go through and we'll talk about Erik ten Hag and his team selection. Has this been coming in regards to his persistence with players like a Bruno Fernandes, etc., who I thought ended up having a very sort of important game. But it was a poor performance, and ultimately we did get very lucky. Now, rules are rules. It was a handball. He deserved to get sent off. So ultimately, Manchester United did deserve to win because we scored more goals in the 90 minutes following the rules. But ultimately, in regards to performance, you're right. We definitely got lucky today.
I'm going to bring up Borche from the Football Capital's comment here. McTominay was put again, but I'm happy he's getting game time. Manchester United will need him in the final 10 or so games. Tom, I'm going to dissect that comment a little bit. If you're Erik ten Hag and you look at this performance, normally we say if these players who are squad players or rotational players have an opportunity to force their way in to Erik ten Hag's thinking or into Erik ten Hag's strongest 11, do you think any player did the opposite today? Is there a player performance? And I hate to be negative when we obviously should be celebrating going to a semi-final, but we have to look at the performance that happened before us. Did any player for you perform to a level where you say, did Erik ten Hag lose trust and say, actually, I don't know if I'm going to trust these players?
I think the three names you sort of look at in regards to those, Jadon Sancho, I thought he got so much criticism online, but obviously had a very important game. So Jadon Sancho, if you would bring that up a little bit later, I think he's an interesting one. But I think he sort of standard, did positive in parts, negative in other parts. I thought he did okay in regards to the rotation across that front three, or even as a potential replacement for Bruno. I think the other two names obviously fall at Harry Maguire and Scott McTominay, who are two players who, when given the chance, if to sort of get a little bit more minutes under their belt, need to do a little bit more. I don't think they took their chance. I thought they both had poor games. I thought Scott McTominay, it was one of those ones that Scott McTominay and Fred, who was going to be picked in there, obviously to replace Casemiro. It's going to be Scott McTominay, the way Erik ten Hag views the game, and I think that's the right decision. But ultimately, again, that's not Scott McTominay's position. He's going to come in and do a job that he's not comfortable with. Now, Fred obviously wasn't going to be trusted in that role, so I thought it was the right decision. But ultimately, McTominay in that role didn't have a good game. But again, that's one of the ones where I do defend him, and I'm not going to have a go at Garnacho having a bad game at left back. That's not his game. Scott McTominay's game is not dictate and play, picking the ball up off the back four. So, look, he was poor and he didn't take his chance. But again, I think he needs to be played in his preferred position. I think in terms of the way we viewed his performance and the hate and abuse he's got on criticism as well online, I think it's a weird one. He had a better pass completion than Sabitzer. You wouldn't really think that, but he did keep the ball a lot better than Sabitzer. Now, Sabitzer ended up going to have a very influential impact on the game. But again, it's how we view these players. I think there are sort of, not dangerous narratives, but sort of unsavoury narratives in regards to a few players, but a little bit deeper. Harry Maguire, I thought, had a poor game in regards to, again, I'm not sure about the system in regards to, okay, were we playing bad because Harry Maguire made us play 10 yards deep? I'm not sure that was the case. But individually, his engagements looked like Harry Maguire was wearing sort of size 15 boots, and the boots were too big for him. He kept tripping over his feet. I thought Lisandro Martinez had to bail him out a few times. So those names, long answer to your question, Scott McTominay and Harry Maguire, yeah, they had poor games, ultimately enough to get the job done and get through, which is obviously what Erik ten Hag wants. But in isolated performances, they definitely didn't take their chances. But as Borche says, the minutes will do them good.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why United played poor, and I'm wondering, and we're asking, is Ten Hag lucky? And the reason for that is we said that prior to this game, looking at let's go back to Real Betis away. Second leg, you're 3 goals up in the tie. And he played a really strong lineup. And once again, Bruno Fernandes, the most minutes of any player in world football. It's absolutely outrageous. I mean, it's full credit to the Portuguese international, but at the same time, you have to be critical of the manager. And again, this isn't Erik ten Hag out. This isn't you're doing a bad job. Nothing like that. He's brilliant, been brilliant this season, the Dutchman. But this is where you put criticism at Erik ten Hag's feet, Tom, because ultimately, you look at that performance, it was very leggy. But I want to ask you another question. Do you put United's performance down to fatigue, or I'll put an alternative suggestion there? Harry Maguire, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Scott McTominay, all occupying a triangle on the field, none of which you would call particularly technical footballers. Do you think that might actually have something to do with United's struggles to play out and play the ball from deep into the final third?
Yeah, I think that's something I didn't really give much thought, but it's definitely a case of that in regards to obviously taking up similar areas of the pitch, but also look at Fulham in regards to, I think they defended very well. I think they exposed or sort of highlighted the potential weakness in regards to the way Erik ten Hag wanted Manchester United to play without his preferred personnel, and they went for it. I thought Andreas Pereira and that Palhinha had a very good game defensively in regards to stopping Manchester United playing out from the back. So ultimately, yeah, definitely a case of that. And ultimately that throws it back to, okay, is that Aaron Wan-Bissaka better on the ball or Diogo Dalot? We always, next week, Dalot's going to be first choice and it's going to be Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Very interesting. But Casemiro, I think, like in terms of Scott McTominay replacing Casemiro, I think so much of the discussion is, Scott McTominay's not good enough. He's not good enough. Get him out of the club. I think the discussion, in my opinion, should be how bloody good Casemiro is. No one's replacing Casemiro. Like the job he does, I think that's what it highlights more. It's not so much McTominay's not good enough to replace Casemiro. Find me one player who is. That's obviously attainable, obviously not a Rodri or anything. I think it really highlights how good Casemiro is because he definitely does make a difference.
The thing is, when you look at that number 6 position, and particularly a number 6 who's, well, your traditional number 6, your quarterback, someone who can get the ball off the back four, good luck finding one of those in world football who sits on the bench. Because the reality is that the good ones all start for their football teams. And I think that's why United struggle with. I think what United need to do is they need to identify the best young player in that position and then look to have someone who's 20, 21, who isn't looking to bomb forward, but they actually see him as a screener because that player can play 20 to 30 games a season and deputize for Casemiro. And what you'd hopefully then have is have them gradually replacing Casemiro as he enters the latter stage of his career. But really interesting points. Marcus Rashford, leggy today. And again, looked leggy at Betis. He scored a rocket, but we said he's looking leggy. Tom, do you have any concerns? Obviously, we go into the international break. But do you have any concerns about Manchester United's current squad heading into the final third of the season? I mean, obviously, the performances have just been gradually getting worse and worse.
None different to what I would have had 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago. It's the same squad, and we sort of highlighted all these issues back then. Maybe they're coming to roost now, and they're a little bit more sort of bubbling to the surface. But no sort of new issues I have with the squad. Ultimately, would you say the performance is getting worse? Technically, okay, you can maybe point to sort of one or two and say, okay, that wasn't as good. Maybe there is a somewhat gradual decline. But ultimately, I think we're plateaued out a little bit from what was a disastrous result at Anfield. I think ultimately you are going to take a little bit of a hit there, and you're not just going to bounce straight back. I know there was the sort of one result against Betis, but ultimately we do have to plateau out a little bit, sort of get back on track, and then hopefully have a strong end of the season. But ultimately, in regards to a strong end of the season, we do have players coming back. In regards to Christian Eriksen, I think he'll be a big sort of big addition to the squad. Here we go, like massive. A new signing sort of thing. A huge thing as well in regards to the performance today. Obviously, Harry Maguire and Scott McTominay got a lot of the criticism. Up front, Weghorst, my God, well, he runs around. Nothing but respect in regards to the effort he puts in. He is non-stop. He's no good. He's shocking. He's not a good footballer. And now ultimately he doesn't need to be a good footballer. He needs to do a job there, which he's doing a very good job for Erik ten Hag, and I do respect him. I do like him. But you can tell the difference. I think we all, when he signed, we had that excitement and tried to get behind him. Well, he's got a good touch for a big man. It's the same we say when someone's no good. It's simply when a tall guy doesn't have a good touch, he's got a good touch for a big man. That's code that he can't play. And look, I like Weghorst again, and fingers crossed he can have a huge impact for the rest of the season. But my God, when the ball comes into him, compared to an Anthony Martial or Harry Kane or Kylian Mbappe or even Erling Haaland, who we sort of agree doesn't have the best first touch, when balls go into those players, the play continues. With Weghorst, it breaks down, and I think that'll be a big interesting point when Anthony Martial.
He's the Burnley striker, isn't he? I mean, he is the Burnley striker,
and that's why I can't criticise him too much. He is what he is, and he's putting 100% effort in. So the last person I'll criticise in regards to like or dislike, but he's a Burnley striker.
George asking the question is Martial gonna rock up or nah? Look, the thing is, right? People might watch this and suggest that I'm an Anthony Martial apologist. Look, I am a fan of, like, he passes the eye test, obviously. I'm not going to defend his injury record. But if you sit there and you make an argument that Wout Weghorst should start over Martial, I'm sorry, it just doesn't happen. Like, if Martial is fit for one more game this season, he starts it because he's that much better at football than Wout Weghorst. And he makes Manchester United that much better as a football team than Wout Weghorst. You know what? I think we're going to look back in this season. You know what I'm really looking forward to, Tom? And obviously, we've got the international break, so lots of healthy debates and lots of footballing discussion about individual players to come, rest assured. But I think we'll look back on this season and look at Marcus Rashford's form and think, what could he have actually done with a striker, like a proper striker next to him? Because the fact he's floated centrally, the fact is, you're not getting the best out of him on the left. I think a lot of that is because United are breaking down in that central position of the pitch. And I'll be really keen to see what does Rashford do with an elite number 9, because I think what his goal return already this season is his best. But I wonder, can he surpass what he's done this season? And obviously, we'll debate all of that. Borche brings up some good number 6 suggestions. Ryan Gravenberch or Edson Alvarez. That's a good shout. The latter.
Obviously, Ten Hag. That's where you do sort of pin a little bit of hope on Eric Ten Hag and his knowledge and his connections in regards to, okay, maybe our recruitment a couple of years ago would have been to go get a 30-year-old from, okay, let's say Casemiro, and now that deal has obviously turned out extremely well. But that would have been, you could see us doing Casemiro under Jose Mourinho or under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. You can't see Gravenberch or Alvarez come in under those managers. That is where hopefully Eric Ten Hag has his finger in the pie and can help out deals like that.
Alvarez is a player. He kind of looks like Martinez a little bit, I must say. But good.
But it's along the lines of thinking what you said in regards to that next player, that young player in the early 20s who can do that role, and okay, it can slot in now and be first team material, but ultimately maybe a little bit of a backup when needed in the big games.
I think so. You can't get someone to compete with Casemiro at the moment. I think that's where it'll be really, really interesting to see what United recruit for, because you're in a position where this guy's still going to be good for at least another 3 seasons, I'd say. But then once he approaches 34, 35, there's definitely going to be a decision to be made there. Weghorst has played more games for United than Martial has for United in the last 2 years. Yeah, I understand that, mate. But Martial last season, he was injured. He was out of favour. There was some concerns with Ralph Rangnick. From what...
it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek that obviously he wasn't at the club last year. He was at Sevilla.
For half the season, right? There was some suggestion, I believe it was from The Athletic. There was some suggestion that when Ralph Rangnick came in, he actually wanted Martial to play. But Martial was saying he was unfit, whereas there
was a big miscommunication. There was an interesting one. I mean, it was a huge story in regards to Martial refusing to play. Then Rangnick said, no, that's not quite what he said. It was a mess. It was just another incident in the dramas that sort of Ralph Rangnick sort of was positively at times, but every week there was a new drama in a Ralph Rangnick press conference. And I remember that Anthony Martial one. They ultimately both had to come and sort of find a middle ground, and both sort of moved on. But there were huge questions then.
Yeah, very, very interesting. You know what else I find interesting, Tom? Cristiano Ronaldo. Because I look at the amount of football that Weghorst is playing, and if he didn't spit out his dummy, he could have played a hell of a lot of football. But anyway, we'll get into that. Look, Adam, whether you think Martial should go or not, I'm with you. And if someone says Martial should go, I'm not debating that. But if you're debating whether he should start over Weghorst now, sorry, I don't think there's a conversation to be had, to be honest. But Tom, we will get into the positives, and we'll wrap it into 3-2-1s, because I'm sure that will bring up because Manchester United didn't win this game. I know you probably won't think so if you've tuned in for the first 18 minutes of this video. But Sabitzer, Bruno Fernandes got his second goal. Whew, good strike. I love it. I mean, no defense helps, but nonetheless, good strike. But Tom, 3-2-1s. Who had the most impactful presence on the football game? I mean, I think it's a pretty obvious one, to be honest, but I'll give you the floor.
Well, you say obvious. I was thinking this sort of right at full time when I was on my way to work, and I was thinking, okay, 3-2-1s are hard, because I was thinking throughout the match in regards to what we had to do and the job that was the individuals had. I thought Lisandro Martinez had a very good game in regards to the way he was sort of 1 or 2 last-ditch tackles. He was the only one really playing out from the back. So I thought, like, Lisandro Martinez, I'm not sure we win that game now. There's a lot of reasons why we could have not won that game, but Lisandro Martinez, I thought, had a very good game. You look at Sabitzer, probably a sort of a 6 out of 10 performance, I thought a good performance, but didn't really stand out. But then ultimately gets the match winner, which was a brilliant flick. I think if anyone's watched that in slow motion, absolutely brilliant goal. But then you also look, David De Gea, huge saves. That save, I think, was it 1-0 down? Or I think we're at 1-0 down. He pulls it out of the top corner. Bruno Fernandes, 2 goals. How can you look past Bruno Fernandes in regards to that impact, especially off his fixture list? And ultimately, I look at a substitution when Anthony came on. Now, I'm not sure Anthony had the greatest game or not, but my God, the impact he had was huge. So in regards to 3 points, look, I don't know. Just in regards to 2 goals, I have to look at Bruno Fernandes. Big penalty, a lot of pressure on him. So I would be looking at Bruno Fernandes, but I wouldn't argue if someone wants to look elsewhere around the pitch.
You know I won't argue against Bruno. At the end of the day, I think taking a penalty in that situation, it's a FA Cup quarter-final. There's a lot of pressure, and I think a lot of players would miss that. Took it coolly as you like. So I'm going Bruno for he scores 2 goals. I mean, enough said.
You mentioned that stat in regards to he's played more minutes than anyone else in Europe's top 5 leagues. Not just that, more than goalkeepers. More than goal. That shouldn't be. I don't know. We have discussions about player welfare and everything. Should that be legal? Like in terms of a player playing more than goalkeepers, I've never seen that before. Like it's always the goalkeepers top of that list, and understandably, rightly so. But for Bruno Fernandes to do that, and yes, we can have discussions about his suitability, the leadership, captain, all this. Okay, well, what's his best position? Are we a better team with or without him? They're all discussions. Ultimately, in regards to a player putting their all out there for Manchester United, he's top of that list at the moment, and nothing but praise for him.
The thing that I think helps Bruno, because I think that the worry is the Wayne Rooney effect. And what I mean by that is Rooney was such a good football player, but then once he hit 30, he just fell off a cliff. Well, if I'm being entirely honest, as much as Wayne Rooney is my favorite player. I mean, obviously I got the picture back there, but let's be honest about Wayne Rooney, Tom. He probably started falling off a cliff at 28. Like 28. I think he scored 34 goals the season before Van Persie came in. But it was downhill from there, and he kind of got himself back up for the Moyes season, and then he just slowly dipped off, didn't he? And when you're a good player like that, you'll always have moments of brilliance, but your impact over a season falls off. You just think of how Rooney played, tenacious, covering every blade of grass. And I see Bruno do that week after week after week after week, and it just worries. I get concerned about his longevity, but where I think it's a bit different. The way Bruno plays, you could almost see him falling deeper and deeper as he gets older. So I probably don't have the same reservation with Bruno as I did with Rooney.
Well, I think that almost changed the game in regards to, okay, we're giving 3 points to Bruno Fernandes, but the substitution by Erik ten Hag to drop Bruno a little bit deeper. And I think in the last month or so, Bruno's best football has come from a little bit deeper, whether he's playing in that position or that's just where he's picking up the ball and impacting the games. I think now I don't see a future for him as like a number 6 in regards to dropping back and playing like Michael Carrick. I don't see that in Bruno's game, but in terms of the attributes for specific moments where he can pick a pass, and I think it really benefits Marcus Rashford. I think Anthony Martial links up quite well with Bruno Fernandes in tight spaces. I think they read each other quite well. But when Bruno Fernandes is 50, 60 yards from Marcus Rashford, I think that's where they link up best. I think because Marcus Rashford's always looking for that ball in behind, and everyone knows Bruno's first instinct, get the ball, where's my through ball? So Bruno's always looking for that, and he doesn't really have that space.
Range, Bruno, doesn't he?
Because if Bruno picks the ball up in the number 10 space, it's quite hard to get your head up and look for that through ball. A lot of people say, oh, your number 10 should be playing your most forward passes. Well, no, nine times out of 10, they have to lay the ball off, play backwards. That's where they're facing. If you can pick the ball up deeper, you can look forward into those through balls. So that's where I think Bruno actually suits his game a little bit, where he picks that ball up in that quarterback number 6 position.
It'll be interesting. I think the recruitment of, well, obviously, Casemiro, someone to deputise for Casemiro, what's of equal importance is that number 8 position. Because I think, like you said, if you can get that player who's a bit more combative, because as much as I love Eriksen, and my God, now that he hasn't played, you can see what he just adds to this Manchester United team. But I think the drop-off with Eriksen is obviously defensively. If you can get that box-to-box midfielder who's a bit more combative but can offer you what Eriksen, maybe, look, there's going to be a drop-off because Eriksen on the ball, I think, is in the elite players in world football. I know maybe that's not fancied or spoken about, but he is. He absolutely is. So I think if you get someone who's probably an upgrade on Sabitzer, an upgrade on Fred, an upgrade on McTominay, and then Bruno can play as an 8. But it'll be interesting to see how this side...
Well, David Ornstein just about an hour ago, before we went live, put out a tweet saying Liverpool seemingly falling closer out of the race for Jude Bellingham. It looks like Man City and Real Madrid are potentially top of that list. So obviously Jude Bellingham's name will be linked with Man United, and ultimately the perfect replacement. Now, what's his motivation to join Man United? Where does he want to play? That's another discussion. But I think everyone looking for that next central midfielder is looking towards Jude Bellingham. Whether he ends up at Old Trafford, the betting man would suggest probably not. But he is that prototype of exactly what you want.
If we get new owners and there's an endless amount to spend, I think it's possible. But I think we'll have to wait and see. I really like the Edson Alvarez shout, if I'm being honest. Obviously, he's not a different kind of player, but I think United can get by. George, aren't we chasing Mason Mount? I don't know where that story came from, to be honest. I think it was from the MEN, so I mean, I don't know if you really want to trust him.
Looks like he just had a change of agent with Chelsea. Whether that's going to result in a new Chelsea deal or he's looking for a move away, who knows?
I take him as a backup. I think there's a player there.
Oh no! Look, he's a brilliant player in regards to we'll discuss technical ability. He's definitely in terms of the upper echelon of players with ability. How does that translate to consistent football at the highest level? That's another discussion. But you could see him definitely moving, and he would go to, let's say, a Man United or a Liverpool, or obviously not Tottenham with the Chelsea link, but that type of club, and he will have a step up or a step sideways from Chelsea. I can't see him going to a Everton or a West Ham or something like that. I think he will stay at the top of the game. But if it was to be at Manchester United, it would be playing second fiddle. So would that tempt him? Probably not. So the player for me in regards to that area of the pitch, Jacob Ramsey from Aston Villa, I'm still banging that drum. I still think if you can't go get Jude Bellingham, and for rightful reasons, in terms of if he's going to cost too much money and that deal's not on the table, in terms of that, who's that next one no one's talking about for me, I really like Jacob Ramsey from Villa.
I like Jacob Ramsey as well. Hell of a player. Adam says, stay away from Mason Mount. He's overrated. I disagree, mate. I think great footballer. There is not one player performing well in that Chelsea team. And I don't think any player could perform well. How do you gel when the squad changes game to game to game to game? Their form has been better of late, I must say. But all in all, I think it's quite hard to, say a player has performed well or not, given the turmoil surrounding that club. Yeah, SJ Bart saying that De Jong ship has sailed. I agree. Tom, back to 3-2-1s. We love a digress. Bruno for 3. I think Anthony for 2. His impact off the bench quite positive.
I don't know if it was Anthony's impact or just the sub in regards to the way that changed. Okay, Bruno came a little bit deeper and we had a little bit more width in regards to that. So I don't know if it was Anthony individually.
Scores, obviously, but did he mean to score? Did he mean to score that?
It's a weird one. I think he means to score. I don't know if he meant to do it in that fashion in terms of I think he was trying to direct it that way, if he actually meant it to sort of go over the goalkeeper the way he did. It's one of the greatest goals I've ever seen. I'm not sure that was the case, but I think he has obviously tried to shoot. I don't know what sort of direction he should try to get on it though. But I look at match-winning goal by Sabitzer. I do look at David De Gea, big save. Anthony sub. So look, I think we did agree Bruno for 3 points. I'll throw it for you for 2.
I liked Anthony's impact. A bit of variety in his game, but look, if I'm being entirely honest, Tom, I thought United were that bad. I mean, outside of Bruno, I got to be honest, I didn't really... And I don't mean to be negative here, but I just being honest, I didn't look at any individual performance and say, yep, they were good.
If it's not a handball on the line, we're having a very different discussion if Fulham win 1-0.
Absolutely. I'll say Anthony because I think he got us going in the right direction, got into the box in a good situation. I like what he did. Positive impact. So I'll say Anthony for 2 personally, if you agree with that. And then 1 point. I mean, yeah, I guess Sabitzer scores. I guess he gets us 2-1 up.
I think it's harsh on De Gea. It's harsh on De Gea. A lovely bit of work by Sancho on Shaw. You're right in regards to that Sabitzer goal. Ultimately, De Gea did play very well, but ultimately, Sabitzer, it's a match-winning goal, and ultimately also becomes, I think, from memory, I think his first Austrian to play. It's for Man United, so his first Austrian to play, ultimately, his first Austrian to score as well. So, big moment for him.
Absolutely. All right, so are we landing that way? Look, I'm with you on De Gea's save, like the Mitrovic header, but outside of that, yeah, big save. I'm with you, but I don't.
Just would have stopped it being 2-0, not 1-0.
That's the thing. I think overall it wasn't like he got peppered at goal and he had to make countless saves. But so that's why I'm stopping short of De Gea for a point. But are we comfortable? Bruno 3, Anthony 2, Sabitzer 1. That's the way it rolls. We're not giving you the 3-2-1 tally board anymore. We're behind closed doors. We will bring that out at the end of the season. So if you are keeping track, maybe you'll know. But if you're not, you'll just have to wait and see. But Tom, Erik ten Hag. Where do we go to from here? What's the focus now? Do you expect any players to pull up any niggles? Do you expect Marcus Rashford a bit of a sore hamstring tomorrow morning?
Unfortunately not. I think in terms of the way just his current group of players, the way they view their national teams, thank God Rafael Varane's obviously retired from international duty, but I think all those other names, especially our South Americans, I think they love playing for their country and they have every right to, of course, but I think all our players are going to go away. I think, unfortunately, we're going to pick up 1 or 2 niggles. Fingers crossed that's not the case, but you can definitely see a situation where that does happen. You would like the club and Erik ten Hag and the players to maybe apply a little bit of pressure to keep 1 or 2 players. back in Manchester, but unfortunately that is not going to be the case, I don't think. But in regards to where to now, and just in regards to this chat, Larry, I think you missed out one of the main parts I did want to discuss. Mitrovic
Look,
and that
I
red
was going
card.
to come to that right at the end. I thought it was too juicy. I had to.
Oh,
I had to
you
pop
can save it for
end.
the end. But in regards to the impact that had on the match, we're talking about 3-2-1s and okay, what changed the game? Mitrovic changed the game.
He is actually nuts. What he did is like I've seen the memes. I've seen people laugh. That is the reason why kids don't want to be referees anymore. Like, you can't do that. It was so unprofessional. There are millions of people who watch football. He's going to get a massive ban.
The stupidity. Okay, the stupidity of doing that, 100% agree. What's he doing? Stupid. Ban him, of course. My more so stupidity, what was he arguing over?
I don't know. It's not a
It was
handball.
clear as day handball, clear as day red card. I'm just thinking, ultimately, like it's not a judgment decision. Like it's clear as day, and I'm just thinking, what on earth is he arguing about? That's my first question to him. Second question will be, why are you acting like that? But what sort of ban did you give him now? Because if you look, let's not sort of compare apples and oranges, but you look at other bans, whether it be for serious stuff like whether it be racism or spitting, these sort of unique situations which don't happen every sort of week. Those sort of unique red cards. Okay, this is a 5-game ban. This is an 8-game ban. Pushing a referee, well, not pushing a referee. You can argue Bruno Fernandes was a push of a referee in a completely different context, but this one was more than a push. This was kind of an aggressive elbow.
Like the referee had to back up.
Yeah, but like an aggressive elbow, which look, it wasn't assault, but in the street, someone could fall over and call it assault, sort of thing. And I'm just thinking, ultimately, what type of ban do you give? Because
I'd support him missing a third of the season.
I think they might give him the rest of the season. I think they might give him 10 games. I think they might make an example of him. Well, whether that's right or wrong, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the right thing is, but I think it's going to be bigger than what a lot of people expect.
I think it could go beyond that. I really do. I think it's going to be a big suspension because how many games left in the league? 10 or so for Fulham?
A bit over there. I think we're almost at that run-in stage. There must be 11 or 12 games.
I'm with you, Tom. I'll be amazed if he plays for the rest of this season. Because the reality is that doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, you need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Or when the next time it happens, it's in 10, 20 years' time from now. Because
what did Paolo Di Canio get? A little bit before your time, Larry, but anyone in the live chat? What did Paolo Di Canio get?
He pushed the referee over.
Yeah, well, when he was playing obviously against Arsenal, he was playing for Sheffield Wednesday at the time. He pushed the referee took a little bit of a dive, to be fair. But I'm sure he would have got a hefty ban as well. I forget what it was at the time, but I think they simply will have to make an example of him.
All right, bear with me. I'm gonna find this.
While Larry's finding that, Paolo Di Canio, what a play. Anyone in the live chat, obviously, unfortunately, has that good moment at Old Trafford where he knocks it past Fabio Barthez, who was playing the offside trap. But Paolo Di Canio, one of not favourite players, but just that sort of iconic Premier League image. He always sort of popped up with those goal of the season contenders. But ultimately,
he got 11 matches and a £10,000 fine.
Okay, if he gets 11 games, so yeah, I think Mitrovic very well could miss the rest of the season, which would be 11 games.
The rest of the season. I think we'll get the rest of the season for sure. Andrew here, Mitrovic got what he deserved. If Mitrovic keeps discipline, anything can happen in the penalty. Fulham gave a winning game to him. Yeah, absolutely.
I think they win the game with him.
What about Marco Silva, the manager for Fulham? What did you make of his red card? Did you agree with that? He was very defensive of his actions at full time. But again I'm
not sure what he's arguing about. No, it might be a previous call. He's saying, well, why didn't you go? I understand that. But in terms of, look, it's very easy. Obviously, if it was our manager, we would be backing him and saying he's right to get in the face of the referee. It's one of those things. I completely understand that. But in regards to this handball, it was a clear handball, a clear red card. There is nothing to argue about. And you could argue Mitrovic is solely responsible for his actions. Of course, no one else is to blame bar Mitrovic. But he could really sit there and say, well, hang on, if my manager didn't lose his head, I would have kept it a little bit cooler. So ultimately, the manager is the ultimate leader. And he's the one who's lost his cool first. So Mitrovic is to blame, of course. But the manager, how can he go and punish Mitrovic now? He can't. Because he did the same thing.
Yeah, embarrassing. I loved he got interviewed by a journalist at full time, Marco Silva, and the journalist asked him a very valid question. He goes, "Did you lose your head a little bit?" And he's like, no, I didn't lose my head. He got defensive of his performance. Then he goes into the press conference and calls Mitrovic stupid. And I'm like, mate, you're the biggest hypocrite in the world. Like,
Yeah, it
you
would be a
just lost
messy
the match and
situation.
you've potentially lost the dressing room because you've acted like a moron yourself. And then you're throwing your players under the bus. And then he's sitting there, oh, well, we were the better team over United. Yeah, but you ultimately lost the game because you weren't professional.
Yeah, no, it's going to cause not whether you call them issues, I'm not sure, but it's got a bit sort of tense around that training ground now because Fulham were very close to qualifying for a semi-final. Ultimately, they get Brighton in a semi-final. And on one day, you could see Fulham in the FA Cup final. And ultimately, those players will be looking, oh, hang on, okay, we take responsibility. But ultimately, if you kept your cool, that wouldn't have happened and we would be in an FA Cup semi-final. So not a good position for the manager. And you would talk about managers, a segue. It's calm compared to what's happening at Tottenham and Antonio Conte. God, thank God that's not happening at Old Trafford.
His post-match press
But
conference.
that would have happened at Old Trafford if he was the manager.
Yeah, and that's
More
why I'm
so.
happy he's not. He is chaos. So if Rob ends up seeing this, Rob, this is why Antonio Conte should not be Manchester United manager. But on that, Tom, on Marco Silva and Mitrovic particularly, there have been a lot of United fans who would ultimately have argued, I'd actually like Mitrovic as a backup striker. Some would even have said in January, go get him. Does his behaviour towards the referee turn you off a little bit at all?
Definitely turns the club off. The club won't see this. Obviously, the Mason Greenwood situation is very different, but we look how we do have to tread carefully around that situation in terms of the attention and scrutiny around sort of behaviour towards referees is a huge thing for clubs now as well. And if you have someone who's going to be coming off a 10-game ban for pushing a referee, he's not someone I don't think is going to be walking through the doors at Old Trafford. In regards to the striker, I think he's that type of striker. In regards to what we have, if we had no one, who could you get on deadline day on loan? Okay, bring Weghorst in. If your number one or two targets weren't there and Mitrovic was on the market, okay, you could go get Mitrovic from Fulham sort of thing. I think he's one of those players. I don't think he should be the top of any list to go and say, okay, how can we win the Premier League next season? Mitrovic is going to be the answer. I think if deadline day and you got no one, okay, bring him in like a Weghorst or like a Gallo. I understand that. But he's not the player for me. He's obviously a handful and he'd be very hard to play against. But Weghorst is hard to play against. Okay, teams ultimately throughout 38 games can deal with it. I think Mitrovic is doing very well, but he's doing very well where he is. Being that second striker, playing 10, 15 games a season and last 20 minutes off the bench, I don't know if he's going to be happy with that. So ultimately, I would stay clear of Mitrovic.
Yeah. Also, because I feel like if he can do that to a referee, I think if he was in Erik ten Hag's dressing room, I think he'd get absolutely annihilated. But
what do you think would happen? Because again, completely different context. But let's say it was the same. Let's say it was the same incident as the Mitrovic one. So not Bruno Fernandes with the thing at Anfield. Again, it's a very unique situation. There was nothing in that. But let's say a Bruno Fernandes or a Marcus Rashford or a Casemiro did what Mitrovic did. How do you think Erik ten Hag would deal with it? Just let the law deal with it, or?
No, I think he'd come hard on him. Like, to be honest, I don't think he would. Look, it's really difficult to say. If I was my manager, and the manager said, actually, I'm gonna sit you out for a game, so learn a bit of discipline, I would support that. I really would, because I think you've got a responsibility to show these players that there is hierarchy. If you do it to a referee, who's to say they don't do it to their manager? Who's to say they don't do it to a more senior official in the football club? You know what I mean? I just think you need to decide that. And this is the separation between the good football clubs and the elite football clubs. The elite football clubs have a culture. Real Madrid had the best individual players you could ever ask for. The Galactico era, the true Galactico era in the noughties. They didn't win squat. I think they won one La Liga. And that's the reason for that is because they didn't have a culture. You had individual players who thought that they were the best player in the world. And when you have that, and you're not buying into the team culture, and team culture is about what do we stand for? What values do we believe in? What's our ethos? How do we communicate? How do we represent ourselves? The way Mitrovic represented himself is an embarrassment to Fulham Football Club. And if I was a football fan of that football club, I don't want to see him play for the rest of the season. If that was
you think how he potentially hurts Fulham's chances? I'm not sure what their league situation is, but I'm sure
they won't get relegated. But
no. I'm looking up. Yeah, I'm looking up towards potential European football.
Oh, look, they're definitely going to be hurt now. I'll just bring up the table, but it will hurt for sure because he'll get a big suspension, and without him, there's just not a lot of goals in that football team. So they're currently ninth, and they're 3 points off Liverpool in sixth.
Yes.
It's criminal. And because he probably won't play the rest of the season, forget that. They won't make it to seventh. They won't make it to seventh. Who oddly enough is Brighton. So we do look ahead. But Tom, I think that's a good place to leave it, mate. Lots of football content to come your way. The international break is here, but do not worry. The podcast has you covered. Lots of debates, lots of discussion, lots of news, ownership debates. It's all going to be here. So make sure you are subscribed if you're new. Help us reach that milestone of 2,000 by the end of the season, which isn't far away. End of the season ends in end of May if we make it to the FA Cup or Europa League. So not too far away.
I think the FA Cup's actually the first week of June now. It's obviously got pushed back. A bit of a late start to the season, I think, or just the extra fixtures. I'm
happy with that. That means I've got to survive 5 weeks before pre-season tour. Love it. But the football comes thick and fast. So make sure you are subscribed if you're new. Like the video if you do enjoy what we're about. And Tom, I'm sure I'll see you soon, mate.
Always, mate. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Cheers.